first and foremost, you got to master the body to master the mind to then master other aspects of your life. And so like you said, when physical health improves, everything around you improves. The winter is going to be hard and harsh, and it's going to be hard, but sometimes the hardest periods of time in life, that's when we experience the greatest amount of growth going forward into the future. A very practical example is I'm having it prompt me. I'm saying, act like you're interviewing me for an industry publication. Instead of me asking it questions, I'm having it ask me questions to clarify my own thinking. So it's a re-engineering of the way that we think. That there are things I need to do different in my life, but I'm failing to make that commitment to take action for one reason: to bridge the gap between thought and action. It's the feeling, it's the emotion, it's the desire to do different.
Hey everybody, Regan Archibald here with Unreasonable Health. And I love when I have creative people on the show, which is pretty much every guest, as you guys know. And thanks if you've been on the show and listening. I really appreciate your participation. But today I've got my friend James Robert Lay, and you're going to love him because he's written an amazing book, and I've got it right here. It's called Banking on Change. James and I met at Chad Willardson's Elevate event, and just hit it off. We're in Strategic Coach together as well, and so I was like, "Oh man, we should have a deeper conversation." He's a digital anthropologist, maybe the first you've met. James, I don't know if you remember at Chad's event. I was like, "What is a digital anthropologist? How cool!"
I do remember that, and a lot of people will say the same thing. Well, what is that? Tell me more. And it's the study of the intersection between marketing, sales, technology, and human behavior. Human behavior being, I would say, the most interesting piece of the equation.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? So you're the first digital anthropologist I know, and hopefully the first I'm introducing to, many people listening to the show today. And how fascinating, because marketing and sales, we all study psychology of human behavior for that, and then technology only exists if it's meaningful to humans. So will it change our behavior or not? And that's what, so it makes perfect sense. Your best-selling book, Banking on Digital Growth, has received a lot of interest because it's not on banking. I mean, it's on real principles, real life. So no matter who you are, you can read this and you'll get a ton out of it. And we'll dive deeper into it today. James also hosts the Banking on Digital Growth podcast, which is ranked among the top 5% of all podcasts in the world. And he's a very energetic human. He's the founder and CEO of Digital Growth Institute, where he's on a mission to help financial brands stop losing loans and deposits. And he's also one of the top global financial services influencers to follow by the financial brand, while his insights are frequently featured in outlets such as U.S. News and World Report, Entrepreneur Magazine, Quartz, American Banker, Credit Union Times, and many others. And then James and I were just talking about a cool little side project, not side, it's going to be the front and center, which is his Leveled Up Business platform. So James, welcome to the show. So good to have you here.
Regan, thanks so much for having me and hanging out. I had a great time hanging out in person and working out with you. Not just during Chad's event, but also you and I got some time in the weight room together.
That's right. Yeah, we did maxing out. We just said who can pee on the tree first, and so we did have a good time just chatting about everything. And you've had if you don't mind, I'd love to start on your health journey, because the last 18 months are pivotal, because you've not had to take any Humira and you've just really put your health at front and center. But what would be different in your life if you didn't make that big change 18 months ago?
Knowing what is possible, knowing how powerful the mind really can be. This was a conversation that I had with someone else who had ankylosing spondylitis, and they were diagnosed. And I said, well, what are you doing to manage that? And they said that I'm just managing it with my mind. I was like, well, what does that mean? They said, you'll figure it out. And it was just that planting of an idea that sent me down a journey to reconnect with myself in a way that I had not connected before. I had been trying since being diagnosed back in 2010 to do everything possible to come off of Humira or Enbrel. And tried, failed, tried, failed, tried, failed. Um, it's funny how the context of time will let you see things through a different lens. Because I want to say it was maybe around 2014, 2015. I came across the work of Wim Hof and doing the breathing and the cold therapy. But I was like, that's not for me. I'm not, can't do that. And then about 18 months ago, I rediscovered it and I said, I can do that. And I started to look into the science behind it and being a little bit more open to gain a new perspective and to explore what is possible. And so starting with the breathing methodologies and the cold therapy, I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't tell my rheumatologist. I said, let me just see what happens, how
Right.
this
Yeah.
plays out. And sure enough, about 6 months in, I told my wife what was going on. I told my rheumatologist, and my rheumatologist was like, I support you 100%. I said, well, thank you for that. She said, but please don't stop coming to see me because I still want to track and measure and monitor. I said, no, I said, I'm going to track because I need to know what's going on the inside. I need the markers of
Yeah.
inflammation in the body. But I really look at that relationship as such a collaboration. And I've been working with her since I was diagnosed 14 years ago.
Sheesh. Well, and you've got really open-minded doctors. I mean, it's great to have a team like that. And so the big thing, I mean, maybe you could talk about some of the worst symptoms of having AK or ankylosing spondylitis.
Yeah. Well, if we go back, uh, I would say my early 20s, I was just getting these random and weird inflammations. Woke up, early marriage, and I had a sausage digit. My finger had, exploded like 3 or 4 times. I was like, that's really weird. Like, what's going on with that? Knee would swell, lower back pain. And then in 2008, I woke up one morning, could not see out of my right eye. Uh, iritis just literally hit me so hard. The pain was incredible, the light sensitivity, but the inflammation had clouded my vision. I went to go see my optometrist, and he had asked me, he goes, have you ever been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition? I said, no. He said, do you have lower back pain? I said, all the time. And I had just said, well, I played basketball, played sports, was, athletic and whatnot, and left it alone. Pain continued to increase, but it was almost like a frog in a boiling pot of water. The
Mm,
pain came on so slowly that I was continuously adjusting to it.
yeah.
But then I was also starting to look for ways to compensate for the pain, fell into some addictive patterns, started to go into myself. And it was around January. I went and saw my GP December of 2009, got a call in January of 2010, 5 months before my first child was born. And he said, you have ankylosing spondylitis because I tested positive for HLB27, the
Wow.
gene marker. And he said about 95% of people who have this gene will end up developing ankylosing spondylitis. And I just went into about 2 years of depression at that point because I was 28 years old.
Mm,
And first thing I did is I Googled ankylosing spondylitis and I saw the pictures
yeah.
of people with hunchback, immobility. And I was like, I don't want that. And I crashed. Dark night of the soul,
Wow.
depression, addiction, almost lost my marriage because of it. And I'm grateful for my wife for sticking by my side through all of that. Because honestly, like she is my helpful and I say sometimes empathetic guide because sometimes she's not so empathetic and I need that hard truth. But that's the long story short of just the pain, I guess you could say.
Sheesh. You made the radical transformation just by adding lifestyle things. I'm a big Wim Hof fan too. I was doing the ice baths and the breathing before it was cool. Now everybody's doing it's like kind of like, would you do the smart ice bath? Wim Hof breathing. But you and I are old school. Got into it early on.
Yeah. And I would say, looking back on this entire experience, I'm nothing but grateful. And I say that because I don't think I would be where I'm at had I not been diagnosed with this condition. Because this condition has almost forced me to put my physical health and my mental health at the forefront of everything that I do. My parents, for example, are part of the 70+% of people that are obese or overweight.
Hmm.
Uh, and so my quote unquote genetic line is like, I don't want to be like that when I grow up. And so once I got out of those 2 years of depression, the physical aspect of it, the physical fitness, and I've always been physically active, but I took that to a whole new level. Like, I'm not going to let this condition define who I am. I'm going to define what this condition means to me.
Um,
And so I started running. I got into marathons. I've run a couple marathons, run multiple half marathons. I've got this big goal of doing a half Ironman one day. But my wife was like, okay, you got to cut off, you got to slow down on that marathon running. Cause at that point we had 4 kids and they were all very young and the time commitment was just very intense. So I said, okay, I'm going to pull that back, and then got into weights and lifting. And so it's been a wonderful, beautiful journey. In hindsight, now 14 years of perspective, but it wasn't like that at the onset.
yeah. Well, and you look great. I mean, in the gym, you're crushing it. And I have a motto that when health improves, everything improves. And so that's where I think baseline for everybody's life, it's like once you hit rock bottom, whatever that is, and then you start taking control over what you can control when it comes to your health, which is exactly what you did. It's crazy how much change people can make. Now, I don't know if you remember, I was telling you about my friend John Lawrence. He's a medical doctor. We were partners for a long time, and now he's just writing books and movies. But he has ankylosing spondylitis, and it was really fascinating to just see his transformation as well. I mean, I worked with him for about a decade, and it was great because he transitioned out of the world of Western medicine and came in very skeptical, but his girlfriend at the time was like, "Yeah, you need to go see Regan," and then transformed his health, and then thousands of people's lives he's touched and changed because of his story. Same with you, James. It's cool. I appreciate you sharing.
Well, you said something. I want you to go back to it just to jog my memory. What did you say about the physical aspect of things? Like, if you want to do a transformation, how did you frame that just now? And you
If
transform.
you want to, if you want to transform anything in your life, first of all, you got to hit rock bottom and you
Yep.
got to say, okay, I'm just not okay with the health that I have today. And my rock bottom is way higher than most people's. And as is yours right now, but once you hit that rock bottom, then you know when health improves, everything improves. And that's when
That's
you
what it was. When health improves, everything improves. And I wanted just to come back to that point, because one of the things that, from my own personal experience, and I would say there's a lot of Stoic philosophy that has driven this. I didn't have this perspective before the diagnosis. And so even if I think about, there was the physical aspect of it, but then there's also the mental aspect, and going into reading and understanding more of the ancient perspectives of Stoicism, for example. If you want to master your mind, first and foremost, you got to master the body. Master the body to master the mind. Master the mind to then master other aspects of your life. And so, like you said, when physical health improves, everything around you improves. Whether that's relational, spiritual, mental, emotional, financial, it really is the core aspect of extension and growth.
Right. Yeah. Lots of wealthy people who have no health, and their wealth does not do them any bit of good. And in my opinion, and they'll even share that. They're like, I wish I wouldn't have sacrificed my health on this journey. And so you're somebody who hasn't, but not only have you become more creative, but man, when I was reading your book, I really resonated with just I mean, yes, you referenced stoicism in there, but it's practical methodologies. It's things like first principles thinking. It's thinking about growth and learning and competence versus incompetence. I mean, it's the things that I look at your book as more of a skill set, a way to capture more skill sets in life. But why did you write the book, Banking on Change? What was your motivator?
If I think back to, I would say I got the idea as I was publishing my first book, which was right at the start of 2020. And if we go back in our minds of that experience and how much change that we experienced in just a relatively short period of time through the COVID experience, something in my gut was saying, buckle up, Buttercup, because this decade, it's gonna be an interesting one. And it wasn't that just in my gut at that point. Early 2020, I started going back and reading from an anthropological perspective of what other experiences were like during times of change and transition. Other books started to come into my perspective. For example, The Fourth Turning came into my field of vision, which was, I think, written in 1996, 1997. And it's the idea that the world works on a 80-year cycle, more or less. And right now we're experiencing the fourth turning. And if you think about the seasons, right, there are four seasons. You've got spring, summer, fall, and winter. And so one could argue we're in a period of winter right now. And how you approach that, first and foremost, within your mind, because that is going to impact your physical well-being. I said, you know what? Here's the good news. What comes after winter? It's the spring. So if we can keep working towards the spring, growth, rebirth, all of that, it's like either, the winter is going to be hard and harsh, and it's going to be hard, but sometimes the hardest periods of time in life, that's when we experience the greatest amount of growth going forward into the future. So I think a lot of it is just how we're going to handle it. So that's why I wrote this, because thinking about all of the change and transformation, the subtitle is The Leader's Guide to Achieving Exponential Growth in the Age of AI. And it's funny, they didn't give me a bad review on Amazon, but they gave me a 4-star review, and I appreciated it because they were like, well, it wasn't a book about AI. And to truth be told, I put this in here because I think that's one of the biggest drivers of change and transformation right now is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
It's how we perceive and navigate the artificial intelligence journey, which has nothing to do about that technology. One of the things that I'm encouraging leaders to really think about, the most important technology that we can learn to master right now is the technology that sits between our ears. It's our biological computer, if you will, the brain. Our mind is the software. And so we must continuously be upgrading the software, just like we upgrade iOS on our phone. We run those updates every now and then the hardware stays the same, but we're continuously upgrading the software to gain a performance improvement.
Man, fascinating. And I think probably the biggest thing, your book, there is a little bit on AI, but not a whole bunch. But the biggest thing you and I were talking about before is how are humans interacting with the new technology? And I think from your, you look back at, anthropology and you start seeing how humans behave. What do you think is the worst behavior that people have with AI right now?
Treating it like Google, watching and observing behavior that's based upon a previous experience. And so, case in point, I mean, as of recording, ChatGPT was launched November 30th, 2022. So we're about 18 months into this. And AI exists before, it went big on November 30th, 2022 with the launch of ChatGPT, just like the internet existed before 1994. It's just that was the inflection point. It began to reach the mass consciousness of humanity. And so now it's being talked about, it's the buzz and whatnot. And it's the hype cycle. It's eventually going to reach a peak of inflated expectations, and then it's going to continue to drop back down, and it'll steady out. But it's thinking that we're Googling based upon an AI, thinking that I'm just going to ask it questions. Whereas a very practical example of something that I'm utilizing GPT for right now is I'm having it prompt me. So I'm saying, act like you're interviewing me for an industry publication. Ask me questions that you would. So now I'm using it to download my own mind to then write an article, summarize something, produce a LinkedIn post. Instead of me asking it questions, I'm having it ask me questions to clarify my own thinking. So it's a re-engineering of the way that we think.
That is brilliant. I've never heard of that, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I like it when I can go ask AI. I'm like, what did Regan Archibald say about thymosin beta 4? And then I can pull up my like some content I've already created on it.
Well, exactly. And I think that's the deeper aspect of the book here. There are 4 seasons that lead to exponential growth. And I wanted to define what I mean by exponential growth. Exponential growth is when an individual has the perception that they are growing personally and professionally at the same exact time. I think historically, we have separated our personal and professional lives for the most part. And I just had this realization recently myself. Like, I've always been trying to work closer towards integration. Very practically speaking, once again, the way that I was utilizing LinkedIn was primarily from a professional context. Never really shared anything personally on that platform until my wife called me out with the hard truth. She goes, "You're far more dimensional than what you're doing on the digital growth front." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "You're a husband, you're a father, you're an entrepreneur, you believe in health and fitness. Why not communicate about those aspects of your life?" And I go, "Because I've never seen it that way. I've never thought about that before."
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of there are 4 seasons that we have to continuously navigate through. There's a season for learning, a season for thinking, a season for doing, and a season for reviewing. But I think where the danger lies, particularly in a period of exponential change and transformation, is we get stuck doing whatever it is that we're doing because it's all that we know. We have to create time to review and reflect, to learn, to think about how to do even better going forward into the future.
Yeah, that is powerful. Because the winter in Eastern philosophy, the winter relates to your kidneys and urinary bladder, or your water element. And the water element, the biggest emotion that drains your kidney energy is fear. But on the flip side is wisdom. So in Eastern philosophy, it's like after the long winter, that's where we get our wisdom from during that. So your 4 seasons, like, I mean, they were talking about this 2,500 years ago. And you're just kind of circling back to the concept of exponential growth, which I love, this personal and professional journey. It was never separated 2,500 years ago. Or you read Stoicism and they weren't like, I'm a professional here and then I'm a family man. And leave it to our wives to keep us honest. Isn't it great?
Well, to me, it's her intuition, her level of intuition, and her ability to feel. And I think that point too, when we're talking about transformation, whether it is health and well-being, whether it's digital transformation, whether it's financial transformation, one of the patterns that I've picked up on working with leaders is there are 4 steps that are required for every individual to navigate and to journey through to achieve some level of growth and transformation. Step number 1, as I was just, sharing this example, this anecdote with my wife, changing how I see my use of LinkedIn.
Yep.
That's step number one. You got to see things differently. And that can come through just continuous education, being a lifelong learner. I try to hack time as much as possible, running or working out, listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks on 1.5 or 2x speed. It's looking for that little bit of an advantage to continuously see things differently, because when you see things differently, your thought patterns are going to change. So when you see different, you're going to think different. This is where working with leaders, I find them begin to get a little tripped up, because I ask them, and I've done this hundreds, if not thousands of times with leaders and workshops and conferences. When you see different, you're going to think different. Yes. When you think different, what's going to happen next? Like James Robert, it's kind of a rhetorical question. That's easy. I'm going to do different. I'm going to be different. I'm going to act different.
Yeah.
Like, are you really? And they sit, they pause, they ponder. I go, because I don't think that you are. They go, well, what do you mean? I go, I know right now I have the philosophical knowledge, I have the head knowledge that there are things I need to do different in my life, but I'm failing to make that commitment to take action for one reason: to bridge the gap between thought and action comes down to one thing. It's the feeling, it's the emotion, it's the desire to do different. So if we think about this in a progression, see different, think different, feel different.
Yeah.
Then we're going to do different, but we have to be careful, because feeling, it is an emotion, inspiration, motivation. Those are fleeting elements. It's like a muscle. It will eventually tire, which is why the work that you're doing, for example, I think is so powerful, because to continue that path when that inspiration and motivation tires, it's like the work that Dan's doing. Yeah. It's the coaching. The coaching can help us push beyond that moment of when the feeling goes away. I don't want to do this anymore. The coach can be the guide to keep us moving forward and taking action, so that we don't fall back into a previous pattern or behavior.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes to your leveled up concept and the community I'm really excited to be a part of in the future, because how many of us could level up just by thinking about our thinking, like Dan teaches us, just think about how we're feeling is the next level from what you're saying. And then seeing how that translates into our behavior, because you never really learn something until you change, until you make a behavior change. And so that's the hardest piece of it.
Well, you're talking about behavior change. And once again, whether you're talking about health, finances, entrepreneurship, business leadership, what drives our behavior the most? And we can work this all the way back to the root, kind of first principles thinking, which you referenced before. It's the beliefs that we have.
Yeah.
And why do we believe what we believe? Because a lot of times we ask, well, why do we do what we do? I think the better question is, why do I believe what I believe? It's my belief system structures that we're probably not even aware of to begin with in the first place, because they're running at such a subconscious level. If we can at least begin to tap into that can then have the greatest exponential transformation that leads to the exponential growth going forward into the future, because it will modify our behavior. Yeah. I'm doing a lot of work right now, with my, to get really personal. I'm doing a lot of work right now with the relationship that I have with my mom. Because that has been such an impediment. That's been such a roadblock, to where we've had my mother and I have had some really good conversations about why she is the way that she is. And I have no animosity. In fact, I have a tremendous amount of empathy for her because of her experience that I was not aware of. I'm 42. I had no idea of what she experienced growing up as a child. How that experience shaped her, particularly when it comes to things, back to your point, you mentioned fear before. She's very scared about a lot of things. And that impacted me as a child growing up, that I've been able to, I would say, be able to break through. But I knew starting this year that unless I address some of this in my own personal life, we're talking about personal and professional growth, I knew that this was always going to be a hindrance to my professional growth. So this is how I think, once again, it's the integration here of these different aspects and blending them together.
And do you find that, it's easier for you to confront, some of the tough things that you need to confront in relationships now that you've done this deeper work, or now that you've looked at, your thinking and your belief systems a little different?
My every year I have a word or a phrase that is my North Star for the year. And this year it was be disciplined to do difficult things.
Mm.
And I'm always looking back and asking, had I not set that intention, would I have done the work that I've done this year? It's just a question that I have, because I really do believe that intention inspires action. It does get easier. It's like anything. You do it once, it's hard. You do it again, it's not as hard, but it's still challenging. You do it
Yeah.
again, it gets easier. And it's making a choice to have difficult conversations, because if we're talking about achieving and unlocking new levels of growth, we don't do this alone. There's relationships that are involved. And whether those relationships that we're actively collaborating with or co-creating with, or maybe there's relationships that are unknowingly holding us back, even though they have nothing to do through the work that we're doing, how might those relationships have created a belief system or a belief structure that is an anchor that could be holding us back, that we just need to cut that anchor. And if we just make that one cut, it just launches us to a whole new level of growth.
Man. So, I mean, if you just had to give like three simple steps of identifying where the anchor is there kind of an equation? What advice would you give people?
So it comes down to asking yourself, how do you want to grow?
Mm.
And something that I wrote about in the book, and grow is an acronym, because there's a lot of acronyms in digital growthtopia. It's the way that this ADD mind can structure things and actually remember them whenever I'm asked questions like this. The first is goals.
Mm.
It's starting with the future and working backwards from that, and getting really, really clear about what the future is that you want to create as an individual or as a team, even as an organization. And what I mean by that, if we're thinking about this idea of exponential growth, all transformation begins within. It starts with the self, and then that transformation then moves to the teams, because teams are made up of individuals.
Um,
And when you transform teams within an organization, you can truly transform an organization. When you transform an organization, that can spill over into the lives of the customers that you're serving.
um,
And so there's a multiplying effect with that. And so getting really clear with the future that you're wanting to create, leaping ahead and looking back, but then asking yourself, okay, that's fantastic. And a lot of us already do goal setting, but one of the things that really transformed the way that I think about goals is it's the R. Thinking about where we're at in the present, what are the biggest roadblocks that stand in the way?
mm.
Because unless we're thinking about surfacing roadblocks now, we're probably eventually going to come up to those roadblocks. But if we can at least begin to perceive, based upon the knowledge that we have today, of what stands in the way, that can take us to what are the opportunities to now transform those roadblocks into a growth opportunity? Because once again, Stoic wisdom, Marcus Aurelius, the impediment to action is the path to action. I'm paraphrasing. What stands in the way becomes the way, or the obstacle is the way. Well,
Yeah.
I look at obstacles really as tremendous opportunities. And if you think about the transformation, the tough and turbulent times that we're in right now, we can look at obstacles all around us and think, that's too much work. It's too hard. Or we can say, you know what? That's our biggest growth opportunity. Let's go climb that mountain together.
Yeah. Well, and this is your year of identifying obstacles. If your mantra is having the discipline to do hard things, I guess maybe you could define hard for us. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it. I'd see it as obstacles, but what do you define hard as?
Difficult. Be disciplined to do difficult things. And
Difficult.
difficult is going to be different for everyone. And for me, difficult on a relationship side, it was addressing some of the unresolved conflict that I had in my life. And knowing that I needed to do that. Difficult could be health and wellness to someone else. And I think difficult, that's the roadblock. And the roadblock is often the belief that we have. Why do we have that belief? And let's dive into that and start uprooting that a little bit and just being curious, not judgmental, but just being really curious as to why that's a roadblock to begin with in the first place. And how do we transform that into an opportunity?
Man, I love that. There's a book called The Slight Edge. I don't know if you've read it, but Olson is his last name, the author. It's been about a decade, but he talks about the easy things in life make life harder when it comes to health. You know, fast food, staying up watching Netflix, not exercising. He said, sometimes it's the hard things that make life easier in the future, and so it's a trade-off.
I like that. And it's funny because we're in the age of AI, we're in the age of artificial intelligence. You think about food, we got artificial sweetener.
Right.
My gut tells me people want something real. People are looking for something real. The human connection, the conversation that we're having here today, to me, if we can do more of this and just have the connection, have the dialogue, have the discussion, we're all going to get even better together because of that. Because you've got AI, for example, that have all of these large language models that they're being trained upon. But what they don't have is they don't have Reagan's experience and context that's sitting within your mind. They don't have what's the experience and the context that's sitting in my mind. The only way that we're going to be able to unlock that is through conversation, it's through dialogue, it's through discussion, because through a shared experience, we're creating something new. I'm seeing things differently. You've left a couple of points to me that I'm going to reference and come back to. That's going to help me see different. It's going to change the way that I think. And then ultimately, I'm going to have to make a choice about feeling an emotion. Like, what am I going to take action on there that I'm inspired to, and maybe need to get some accountability that if I'm going to keep moving forward, I'm going to need some help so that I don't fall back to whatever it was before. So it's all interconnected here, man.
Man, couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's been exciting. One of the books I'm reading right now is Slow Productivity by Cal Newport, and a lot of what some of the principles in banking on change. It's this growth strategy, but he also talks about people in creative work. Like, you're very creative. I don't know if you like think of yourself as a creator, as someone who's creative, but you're incredibly creative. Even when I saw your office, when you had the big camera zoom out, I was like, now that's a creative dude. Like, he set up everything. But the slow productivity is about giving yourself time to find those really valuable gems. Thing I like about what you're doing is you're creating momentum every day of your life, getting healthier, getting fitter, growing your business, making a bigger impact, better family, all those things, better relationships, obviously, like you've shared with what you're doing with your mom. But in the bigger scheme, you're also, the slow productivity is this this leveled up business, and just thinking, how can I make a bigger impact with leadership and with teams? And so that's one of the things I'd love to get you back on the show once that is fully vetted out and launched. I'd love to be a part of that in any way I can help, because I see that community aspect and that human to human interaction. Like, you're just going to create a place where people can now start talking about these concepts and learning how to build their personal and professional life simultaneously. So really appreciate the thoughts you've given us today. But if you just had one kind of closing insight that you could leave with the audience on how they can really improve their lives, what would that insight be?
You mentioned Cal Newport, and I'll connect this back to the book because it's something that I don't think a lot of us are thinking about right now, at least consciously. It's a concept that I have framed in the book. I call it digital stoicism.
Mm.
It's re-examining the relationships that we have with our digital devices, primarily our phone.
Mm.
I've struggled with digital addiction over the years, in multiple facets, to the point to where I ended up first did the easy work. I took off social media. This has been a multi-year process. I took off social media. I took off my email second, so I have no email on my phone. And then the third one, I took off my browser, my internet browser, because I found that I could just never be fully present in a conversation because someone would say something and I just love to learn. I love knowledge. So I'd look it up and try to find it. My wife ended up locking me out of my iOS because I could end up sliding Safari back in there. So she's locked me out. There's the accountability piece, but I think really re-examining the relationship that we have with our devices, because it is a relationship, just like you and I have a relationship, and I'm looking forward to this relationship growing over time. The relationship that we have with our devices, is it managing us or are we managing it?
Yeah.
And how does that relationship impact the other relationships that we have with other people that are flesh and blood, soul, spirit? I think it's just an important question that we're going to ask, particularly if we have kids. And my wife and I, we have 4 kids, 14, 12, 10, and 8, and have been very mindful of the relationships that they're developing with devices, to the point to where there's a lot of oversight, there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of dialogue. To me, that's the most important piece, because when we can quiet some of the chaos that can come in through our devices, it's much easier to get clarity into what our goals are, what the roadblocks are, what the obstacles that can become opportunities are. Calm and stillness is the key.
Wow. Well, and I've actually seen your phone when we were exchanging contact information. You're like, look at this. There's nothing. I think that's so brilliant. What a piece of wisdom to leave with us. Is your device managing you, or are you managing your device? And I think as adults, that's a daily question, almost an hourly question we've got to ask ourselves. So, James, what a phenomenal time I've had with you. I really appreciate your insights. Grab the book, Banking on Change, everybody, if you want to just to be enlightened about a variety of subjects. The historical context in there is great. There's even some biblical references that are phenomenal, creating context around, bigger vision, bigger goals. And so really appreciate the work you're doing. What's the best way that people can find you?
Regan, thank you so much. And thanks for the conversation. Best way to find me, www.jamesrobertlay.com. You can find me online, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message. Always looking to connect with other good, growth-minded human beings.
Awesome. Well, there you have it. And for those of you who love this episode, share with your friends, family, loved ones. Yeah, better yet, pick up a book, Banking on Change, for your loved ones. Give it to them, give it to your teams. You won't be disappointed. James, thanks again for being on the show. And for those of you out there, we love and appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.